And now it's time for the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview with Tyler Henry and Devin Hanney.
Hello, everyone, and welcome in for another installment of the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show, presented by Kansas Wesleyan University, where we take a look around at all of our area schools and keep you up to date with all the latest happenings in the world of high school football action. Unfortunately for our area, last week seemed to be a culling week for many of our Saline County teams. Go ahead and take a look back at our area scoreboard presented by Bennington State Bank as we look at a Week 9 playoff slate that, had some potential for some teams in our area to possibly pull off some upsets. There were some teams that ended up on the wrong side of upsets. And then there were a few games that went about the way that we thought they might, but let's go ahead and break down the full set of scores. And we'll begin in Class 5A with Salina Central. They put themselves a little bit behind the 8 ball, finishing the regular season under 500. They had to go on the road to take on a very good Maize South team, and they had the talent to get it done, but Maize South controlled that game from the jump. They end up walking out of town with a confident 56-35 victory and knocking off Salina Central. Central finishes their season at 3-6. Our other 5A school was Salina South, who had a rematch with a Hutchinson team that knocked them off early in the year by a big margin. That game went about the way you might expect, 42-7 in favor of the Salt Hawks of Hutchinson, but a good sign for Salina South. I know they finished their year at 1-8, but they get their first victory in more than 3 complete regular seasons. Hopefully that group putting the pieces together and will be prepared to take another step forward as that young core continues to grow and mature and get a little bit older and a little bit stronger headed into 2025. Abilene came into the postseason looking all right. They had a couple of shaky performances, but they had also had a couple of really good performances against some really good 4A teams, but they got a tough matchup in McPherson. That's a Bulldog team that is very seasoned when you look at their regular season record, and more important, when you look at their regular season schedule and the teams that they were losing to. They got the job done at home, and they got it done by a confident margin of 41-20. One of the 2 teams in our area that did get a victory, and it's a team that many expected not only to win this game, but a team that some people have picked to win the 2A state championship so far this season. We'll see how that shakes out, but Southeast of Saline got off to a phenomenal start. 76-12 was the final over Larned. The Indians came out, they punched first with a score in that game, but then Southeast of Saline rattled off 70. Yes, you heard that right, 70 unanswered points, all in the first half. They led 70-6 going into the locker room at the halftime break, and they walk out of town with a confident, again, 76-12 win over the Larned Indians to move on to the second round here this week. A team in our area that ended up on the wrong side of an upset was the Ellsworth Bearcats, who had been on a 3-game losing skid coming into the most important portion of their season. And unfortunately for Ellsworth, despite being at home, they got matched up against a program that was moving in the opposite direction. Hoisington got off to a really brutal start here in 2024, but they turned things around. They won 3 of their last 4. And when you go back and look at the teams that Hoisington was losing to, it starts to give you a little bit more of the full picture. They were a battle-tested unit. They came in on the road, and their defense really just kind of controlled what the Bearcats wanted to do. Hoisington comes away with the win, moving on to the second round by a final score last week of 28-15. The last of our 2A schools from the NCAA was Minneapolis, who had a rematch of their own. This time, though, instead of getting Beloit at home, they had to make the travel out to Beloit and take on the Trojans. That game went the way of the Trojans with a chance to kind of regroup and take another look at the way that they wanted to play against the Lions. Minneapolis battled, but ultimately that game went the way of Beloit. Your final score in that one was 41-14. And then the last overall of our NCAA school saw Sacred Heart at home on the campus of Kansas Wesleyan University, and Sacred Heart had to take on Marion. They did get a home game, but the way the bracket was structured, Marion came out of a very tough district. Sacred Heart came out of a much weaker district, and as a result, Marion just steamrolled the night. 70-31 was the final in that one. Bennington completes their season with just 1 win. They did beat Harrington to sneak into the playoffs. Unfortunately, the reward for that win was a matchup against the defending state champion in Conway Springs, and a team that rolled into the postseason undefeated. Conway handled their business at home as the Cardinals defeated the Bulldogs by a final score of 59-20. And then down in 8-man to round out our area games, El Saline took it to Mankato Rock Hills. They get the 45 win by a final score of 56-8, a mercy rule victory for the El Saline Cardinals, who lost their first game of the season against Hanover and have not lost since. They have rattled off 8 consecutive wins. They will roll into the second round this week with an 8-1 record, and they are a team that I think a lot of people are starting to really pay attention to. Again, early in the year, they looked like just another strong 8-man Division I team. Now people are starting to wonder if the Cardinals might have a shot to run through a really good 8-man Division I gauntlet and potentially take home some hardware. We'll have to wait and see. But before we talk more about the El Salina Cardinals, we do have one final game. It was a Thursday game, and it saw Clifton Clyde defeat the Solomon Gorillas 45-0. But and speaking of young teams, that's a Solomon squad that had just 2 seniors on their roster this year. They do not have a lot of junior depth. That is a mostly sophomore squad, and they have laid the groundwork for what could be a very bright future as all of those sophomores become juniors, and the juniors they do have become seniors, looking to turn things around and take a step in the right direction when the season gets underway in 2025. That's all for a look back at the Week 9 playoff slate and the games that took place last week. We'll step away. When we come back, we'll hear from Joe Roach, the head coach of the El Salina Cardinals, to get his thoughts on what El Salina might be able to achieve and more about their contest this week. And then when we return for our third and final segment, we'll break down the last 2 playoff games still happening in our area and let you know where you can tune in for coverage of Southeast of Salina's game against Norton. All that and more is coming up right around the corner. You're listening to the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show, and it's presented by Kansas Wesleyan right here on KINA.
With record-breaking enrollment, great new facilities, and top-notch activities, Kansas Wesleyan's the place to be. Whether you want to study nursing, elementary education, criminal justice, or social work, our academic programs will open doors for your future, all while you participate in activities like music, theater, or athletics. Learn more about why KWU's the place to be by visiting kwu.edu. That's kwu.edu.
The hours of drills, the pre-dawn workouts, the hundreds of laps. It takes hard work, passion, and drive to do what you love. When you're sidelined by injury, Salina Regional Sports Medicine is just as committed and works just as hard to get you back in the game. Salina Regional Sports Medicine, 785-452-7366. SalinaRegionalSportsMedicine.com.
And now back to the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview.
Welcome back in here on the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show, presented by Kansas Wesleyan. We're joined now by Joe Roach, head coach of your El Salina Cardinals. And Coach Roach, first and foremost, thank you so much for taking some time and joining us here today.
Yeah, you bet. Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
So your team enters the second round of the playoffs here at 8-1. You know, if you take this whole season as one big package deal, what overall has been the best thing that you've seen from your guys here in 2024?
Really just the progression of being on the same page all the time, which, you know, all teams struggle with regardless, but those times are few and far between right now for us, where at the beginning of the year they were a little bit more spread out and in bulk mass sometimes. And how our defense is coming around. I had my question marks on our defense. I knew our defensive line was going to be good. I knew we could be better in the defensive secondary, but I had really had my doubts about our linebackers, and they have really started to play well and really bought into the way we do things. But yeah, just the progression of the kids and the team overall from day to day has been really fun to watch.
Well, and speaking of progression, I mean, your team has won 8 straight games. You've won some really dominant ones here recently. You know, do you feel like this team is starting to play its best football here at the end of the season? And if so, what does that look like to you on the field?
I do. I think our best is still to come. But to me, that looks like on the offensive side, it's just overall being on the same, exactly on the same timing and without mistakes. So we've done a really great job of not turning the ball over this season, and we haven't really hurt ourselves too much on penalties. And those things, the penalties those situations have been ironed out. So to me, it's just those little things and the control of the ball and the clock, and being when we want to throw the ball, we throw the ball. So for a play caller, it's a perfect environment. On defense, it's really playing with leverage and staying gap sound because 8-man defense is just helter-skelter, hard to play. And you make one little footwork, mistake, and it could be 6 points. Whereas an 11-man, that might not be so true all the time. But anyway, yeah, that's pretty much what it looks like. So it's kind of a long drawn out answer, but just the perfect scenario and the coach can be coming out.
Well, and I was curious too, and maybe it's some of the stuff that you just talked about, but you also mentioned you thought this team's best days are still ahead of it. What are some maybe tiny tweaks or improvements that you still want to see here as you continue this playoff run?
I want to see us offensively distribute the ball and make the defense play and defend all of our athletes at the same time all over the field. And when we can get to that, we're going to be really scary because, we have some good athletes, and it's hard to get them all the ball when we need them to, have the ball, and not need to have the ball, but, it's hard to spread that well sometimes when you have a play call. So, I just want to see us keep doing that and keep playing sound defensively.
You and I talked a little bit about this before we started the interview. 8-man Division I, at least in my opinion, is one of the most loaded divisions in the state of Kansas. What are your thoughts on just the level of competition across the board in this bracket?
Yeah, it's only going to get better, man. And, I thought getting into 8-man was going to be more of a wide open game and there'll be some space and everything like that. But, the good teams, they still wear you down. They still confine you to a box, and then they grind you down to a nub. But there's some teams that'll do that. Hoxie's really good this year. Wichita County is really good this year. West Elk is really good. South Central, I've seen them on tape. They look good. So, yeah, there's going to be some good teams. And this team that we're going to play right now, Madison, man, they're good. I try to know all about them, but I can. But, man, they're going to be good. They're going to be big up front, and they're going to bring it.
Well, and speaking of good teams, I was curious to ask you about that too. Your schedule, you guys went out and played a really tough schedule this year. Obviously, Hanover is very good this season. Osborne's really good. I know Canton Galba was a little bit down this year, but they've still got some dogs on that team. Little River, Central Plains. How well prepared do you feel like those games have made this team for the games that are still to come in this playoff bracket?
Well, we've definitely had to be physical throughout the season, that's for sure, which I admire because that's one of our team goals going into every game is to out-hit and out-block the other team. And for the most part, we have, we've done that. It's been great. But I think we're still healthy. So I think our tough schedule will only make us better and has made us better throughout this year, and hopefully just even prepare us more for the playoffs.
Your team is incredibly talented. Obviously, we know the work ethic of these kids. They're also incredibly confident, I would imagine, after winning 8 games in a row. I know the road is going to be steep, but I was curious to get your thoughts on this. If your team can play up to its very best form for the next 4 weeks, is there any reason that Salina can't be the team to win it all this year in 8-man Division I?
Well, if we can we're as good as anybody else on any given day. And we come to play. We play hard. We come to play physical football, and we're going to take that to where it takes us. And as long as we can stay healthy, man, who knows how far we could go. But there's some good teams out there. A lot of them. So we got to work cut out for us, just like those other teams do. When they come to our place and play us, man, they better be ready for a physical football game, and we expect the same.
Well, and you get one of those teams coming in here this week. This is a strong Madison program. They come in, at least here in 2024, at 6-3. When you have a chance to break the Bulldogs down on film, what are some things that stand out to you, and what are some challenges that they really present on both sides of the ball?
Well, they got some athletes at their skill positions, and they have some big boys up front. And it's going to be imperative for us not to let those big boys build up steam and swallow us up as blockers. So we're going to need to force the timing of the point of attack at all times, and just use what we have to our advantage, which is speed, quickness, and some passion in football.
Well, and maybe you touched on some of those things just now, but overall, specifically in regards to Madison, what would you say are your biggest keys to the game? What does Salina have to do to get the big win and advance to that quarterfinal round next week?
We need to stop their run game, make them throw into our secondary, and take our chances like that, and play good, sound defense. Offensively, we need to be at the same time, the same place, at all those things that a coach wants to see, and control the clock and the ball. That'd be great.
Well, Coach Roach, thank you again so much for your time, sir, and best of luck to your Cardinals this week.
Hey, I appreciate it. Thank you very much. Go Cardinals.
Once again, that was Joe Roach, head coach of the El Salina Cardinals, joining us here for the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show. We'll step away, but when we return, we'll set up 2 matchups remaining in our area. That when we return right here on KINA.
The Bennington State Bank proudly supports local sports and wants each student to know that their hard work and talent is noticed and appreciated. At Bennington State Bank, they care about local communities and are committed to fostering long-term relationships through the delivery of excellent customer service, integrity, and fairness. From helping local businesses to supporting community youth and nonprofits to helping you purchase your dream home or invest in your future, Bennington State Bank is here to help. Give them a call to experience exceptional banking with hometown service. Bennington State Bank, your trusted hometown bank. Member FDIC.
We spend 1/3 of our lives working to build our wealth. With over 50 years of combined experience, Billings Group wants to be there to help manage yours. If you're planning for retirement or looking for financial coaching, then come see us on Westchester Drive, east of the YMCA, or visit our website at billingsgroup.com. Securities offered by registered representatives through Private Client Services, member FINRA, SIPC. Advisory products and services offered by investment advisory representatives through RFG Advisory, a registered investment advisor. RFG Advisory, Billings Group, and Private Client Services are unaffiliated entities.
And now back to the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview.
Welcome back in here on the Salina Post Sports Friday Night Preview Show, presented by Kansas Wesleyan University. Tyler Henry back with you here, and as we heard from head coach Joe Roach, let's go ahead and talk a little bit more about the matchup coming up here for El Salina. We're looking at 2 matchups remaining in our area, El Salina and Southeast of Salina, the only 2 teams left in the postseason, and we'll start with the Cardinals, who take on Madison here tonight. That's a Madison team that is a little bit down from what they have historically been, but remember, a few seasons ago, they were a real powerhouse program. The question is, will it matter against this El Salina squad? El Salina's been playing so well on both sides of the ball. They have allowed double-digit scoring in just 2 games since their week 2 matchup against Osborne. By the way, that Osborne game was still a 38-20 victory for the Cardinals. Their only loss of the year came to Hanover. That came 34-16 back in week number 1, and since then, not only have they beaten everybody that they've played, they have everything that you want. They've got blowout wins where they have taken the 45 rule and won by mercy. They've also got a couple of really good victories, though, against some powerhouse programs. They squeaked by a state-ranked Little River program, 38-36 earlier this year, and then they played Central Plains in a game that I think a lot of people thought was going to be a critical test for the Cardinals. And boy, if it was a test, they completely aced it. Your final score in that game, 58-12. They get that one by mercy rule. They now turn their attention to Madison after a 56-8 victory over Rock Hills. Taking a look at Madison, they have finished out their season the way that you would like to if you're in this 8-man squad. They did start the year off 1-2, but since then they rebounded. They won 4 straight games. Near the end of the regular season, they lost their last game of the year to Chase County, 54-6. And that's kind of the one late blemish on the resume here for this team. It was Madison that lost to Chase County, a 7-2 squad, but it's a Chase County team too that kind of did the same thing, right? They got off to a slow start at 1-2 with losses to Little River and Axtell. Since then, they have not lost, and they've got wins over Linden, Northern Heights, Madison. I mean, they have put together an impressive resume. Still, though, watch out. This is a Madison team that is hungry to advance to the next round. It is, however, an El Salina team that I think has the edge in this game, and for that, El Salina should be in good shape if they can come out and play the way that they've played on both sides of the ball to roll through to the next round of the playoffs with a win here tonight. The other game happening in our area, we'll see the Southeast of Salina Trojans, still undefeated, still ranked number 1 in Class 2A according to K-Preps at 9-0 under head coach Mitch Gebhardt. And boy, you want to talk about starting off your playoff run with a bang. How about a 76-12 win over Larned? The Trojans absolutely dominated the Indians last week. They gave up an opening touchdown, and then they responded by scoring 70 unanswered first half points to go into the locker room up 70-6 and never looked back. When you look at the bracket, this is going to be kind of an interesting one because Southeast of Salina, normally you're the number 1 team on either the East or the West. You're going to get a couple of teams that you're expected to beat. And all of a sudden they're looking around going, hey, what are the 8-1 Norton Blue Jays, who made a run all the way to the state semifinals last year, doing here? Well, it's kind of a unique answer. This is a Norton team that finished out their season 7-1 in the regular season. The only loss of the year came to an average to above average Phillipsburg team, but it was a bad loss, 50-21. And with tiebreaker rules, that actually put Norton in a position where they slid all the way from first place down to third place in their district, putting them on the wrong side of the bracket and right in the path of Southeast of Salina. This is going to be a game that a lot of people didn't expect to see until the round of 16, maybe even the semifinals, depending on how good Norton could look by the end of the year. all of a sudden, this is arguably the best game in the bracket, maybe not just in Class 2A, but in the state of Kansas. And Southeast of Saline, make no mistake about it, they are going to have their work cut out for them as they look to take down this Norton team. Many people still think that Southeast is the favorite. They've got that high-powered offense, but this is a Norton team that runs through senior quarterback Eli Jones. He's put up some ridiculous numbers, completing 59% of his passes for 1,467 yards, 12 touchdowns, and 3 picks. And oh yeah, by the way, he leads the running game with 628 more yards and 16 more touchdowns. For Southeast, it is a simple formula. You find a way to slow down Eli Jones, you find a way to win this football game, and whether or not they can do that will depend on their ability to slow them down on offense and keep their defense unrested and tired. If SES can keep their offense on the field the way they've done to people and get a couple of those big splash plays into the mix as well. That game will be streamed as always with live video and audio coverage on Salina Post. You can also tune in for it right here on KINA. Pre-game coverage for Southeast of Saline will begin right after this show, but before we go, we do want to check in on our good friends over at Kansas Wesleyan. They are in the midst of their crossover season, and it all starts here tonight as the men's basketball team has made the trip up to Waldorf, Iowa. They will battle the Warriors with a 6 o'clock tip-off time. Pre-game coverage begins at 5:30. You can tune in for that on 94.5 Prime FM. Then tomorrow, it's a full day for Kansas Wesleyan. Our football coverage will be right here on KINA as the football team takes on the Ottawa Braves. The Countdown to Kickoff show presented by CAD Law begins at noon with kickoff set for 1 o'clock. You can also turn your attention over to our basketball coverage as the Kansas Wesleyan women's basketball program takes on Morningside. Those games will be played over on Prime FM. Again, that's 94.5 FM, and K-Dub will open that game against Morningside. The women's team will play at 1 o'clock with a 12:30 pregame. The men's game will follow at approximately 3 o'clock, so it's doubleheader basketball action on Prime FM. It's football action on KINA. It's a full weekend for the Kansas Wesleyan Coyotes. We will step away, but when we return, it's the L&L Advisors Countdown to Kickoff show for Southeast of Saline, Trojans and Blue Jays. Playoff coverage, that's coming up next. You're listening to it right here on KINA.